Hey, everybody, welcome aboard the Tabletop Express. We are here for a follow up to our October 2024 episode of Call Aboard with a review that we did not quite get to cover in full. I did a little bit of a preview of sorts and a little bit of discussion of some of my thoughts, but Ryan is here now and we're able to give you our full review of one of the games that we got a review copy of, which is Harrow County. Uh,
Wait.
Ryan,
Harrow County, the Game of Gothic Conflict.
yes, and Ryan, I talked a little bit about this game, but maybe you could dig into the some of the more nitty gritty details here and give people a little bit more of a bigger picture of gameplay.
Sure. If you want to pull up some pictures, let me talk through the world. So, Harrow County, the Game of Gothic Conflict, designed by Jay Quimier and Shad, art by Tyler Crook from publisher Off the Page Games. First of all, this is a review copy sent to us by the publisher. Well, actually, by the designer. And we also have a copy of the expansion, Harrow County, the Fairfolk expansion, which we'll be getting to another review by the end of this year. But let's talk about this. So Harrow County is based off of the I believe it's Dark Horse comic series, Harrow County. Same name. And in this game, each player will be controlling an asymmetric player faction. So you got a couple different factions. I believe one's called the Family.
Yep.
Which, if you play as the Family, you have the right to say we are family. I got all my gremlins with me. So that's some fact. There's what other factions? I remember there's a weird one that changes the game completely called Hester. And then what was the other basic one? It was called.
I played as Hester, I think, as the Family.
No, you didn't play as Hester.
Oh, were you Hester?
No, we both did the Family and the red and blue pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, one was we were Emmy and Levi, I remember specifically.
And let's confirm this too. The third player, essentially the 3-player game, you can enter as Hester, the dead witch buried under the tree.
Yes, and this is Hester.
The protectors are the other ones. If I'm
the
not
protectors.
mistaken.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So and then there's another faction that we actually did not try out yet, the purple faction. But they changed the game greatly too. But that's the whole thing about this game. It's an asymmetric. Man, I'm gonna get that word right one day. It's an asymmetric game where I wasn't expecting this to be an asymmetric kind of abstract-y game.
Yeah.
When I hear a comic book themed board game that has this gorgeous art and such like a striking look, I'm going to imagine what, like a dungeon crawl kind of thing, a something heavily thematic. And in this one, it was an asymmetric board game, not as a I'm not saying as a bad thing. I
Right.
just had no idea what I was going into. You ever see like a movie where the trailer says one thing and then you go into the movie and it's completely different?
Well,
I felt like that based on the box cover.
Well, think about it this way. How many games are we playing that are based on IPs that are following a story? I mean, I realize that probably a lot of them are lighter than this one. This one is
Yeah.
almost a 4 on BGG, quite frankly.
You mean weight wise?
Yeah, like weight wise. But a lot of these, if you look at some of those Funko games, right?
Yeah.
Like they follow very heavy stories connected to the story to the T almost. This one, well, it connects to the story and the characters and in that way brings that theme in. The gameplay is not, I feel like, completely controlled by the IP. And that's
Yeah.
what makes it such more of an abstract experience. And again, to your point, not a negative, right? Because I think sometimes people think of abstract as, well, you didn't hit on the theme, but as I described this, it was an unexpected experience. The abstract part was enjoyable for me because again, we were learning this game over multiple plays, and that was the biggest thing I actually pointed out last night. Ryan, is it was because it was a heavier game. It was also a game that I felt needed multiple plays.
Yeah.
And that was probably the largest challenge was, oh, how does this one play? And how does this one play? And even once I got an idea of how one played, I was still trying to figure out what the best way to play that character was.
Well,
So a
because
lot
your
of variety.
faction has an overall goal, but then within the factions, you play as one legend character, and that
Mhm.
character has their own individual special abilities too. And they have two sides. You could pick one side ability or the other side ability. So, I mean, the amount of options that are there, there's a plethora of options.
Yeah.
Um, and just because there's a plethora of options, a lot of times I feel like people might quickly say, well, it's very replayable because there are a lot of options there, right? Um, and with this game in particular, I felt like I saw enough out of the just the first two plays too. When we played for the first time, by the way, speaking with learning it, uh, we had uh, the designer sent us a copy of the updated rulebook.
Yep.
And he said, ignore the one in the box. This one's better. So I did completely ignore the one in the box, and we moved on to the newer rulebook on a PDF, and it walks you through the entire game. So both you and I, after a stream, we banged this out, and we had like the big PDF on the screen, and it kind of just went through it page by page. Um, and I think it was fine for like a tutorial for sure. My big gripe though was we played it a second time a couple weeks later, and all of those rules just fell out of my head. You know, I had a hard time remembering what most anything was, and going back into that rule book was a little rough, even on the newer rule book, because I felt like it wasn't that great as a reference. I felt like I really need to sit down and fully read it again to play it.
Yeah, we've run into some games, and it's interesting too because one of the ways we discovered this was because of our mutual affection for Vagrant Song, right? Like
Yeah,
that was how we discovered it. And Vagrant Song had the same challenge for me with the rule book, where the rule book left me wanting. And we've both said that as much before. I will say from a gameplay perspective, it is a complicated game. And by the way, hello, I see a man of a meeple in the house. Good to see you.
howdy.
I think it is a complicated game. And you make a really good point because you talk about replayability. This game, I think, has replayability if you've got people invested in playing it. But to that point, you've got to have people willing to come back because it's going to take a few turns, a few games, I feel like, to really get to the point where you feel really comfortable with your strategy, even with core gameplay. And so that's probably the largest challenge with this game. If this is a game you're going to dive into and really play a bunch and have someone or one or two people who will be able to do that with you on repeated plays, I think, yes, it can highly succeed in having replayability. But in general replayability, the question is, are you going to go back to it? And that's the question you have to ask yourself when you look at this game. Uh,
Right, because generally you're doing the same thing, even though your player abilities can be wildly different. The
yes.
objectives for your faction as a whole are largely the same. You know, at least with the two main factions, we're really trying to do the same thing. We're just trying to get to the most points, which we're trying to find that point board. It was right over here. This guy. So we're just trying to advance to the first to 7 points, and we're doing that by just kind of doing the same thing, which is just you set your marker, you set your opponent's marker rather across the board to make it hard for them to reach out to, and you just gotta connect to it. You just gotta connect to it and make points to it. So that so going back to it, let's talk about a couple more mechanics before I dive into like more of my opinions on the game as a whole. Um, so the on your turn, you're going to be flipping over a mason jar, and that mason jar will determine what action you're going to do. There's 4 different kinds of actions you can do, and then when you flip over that action, if you're the first person to flip that action in that particular column, you get to do the special benefit that's in that column. So the first person to actually do it gets that Benny, which is cool, which is nice, you know.
And those are going to vary from round to round, just so people are aware too. So those are going to
Yeah, they vary from round to round. Um, and with that being said, uh, yeah, again, I just felt like I was taken out of it a little bit, you know, because it was a matter of, okay, what does this action do? Okay, well, what does this action do if I am this faction? Okay, what does action do? Okay, what does this action do if I am this faction? You know,
yeah.
because we still play wildly different. So there's a lot just going back and forth with the rule book of, okay, what do I do? Okay, what do I do? And by the time you figure out what you're doing at the end, it's just boom, you know?
I go back to, because mechanically in this game, by the way, it is about connecting points. It is about there are some interesting actions that you do engage with. There is some interaction of sorts in this game where you actually will at one point be placing something down for your opponent that they're going to want to be able to reach, and you're able to choose where it goes. So there are some different things that come into play that make it interactive in that sense. There's battling that's going to happen. Can we talk a little bit about the battling mechanic, because I do
Oh
enjoy the
yeah,
battling mechanic in this
the
one?
battling mechanic was really cool. So it's a cube tower, which is probably the coolest thing and biggest appeal of this game. The box has a built-in cube tower, so you're always standing up the box title and just dropping in these cubes, and
Yeah.
then you determine victory based on the number of cubes that drop out, and you're gonna add in cubes and stuff based on, like, when you upgrade your strength, it's how many cubes you add in the pool, and sometimes those cubes are gonna stick around the tower, which is exciting, you know. So when it comes to time to battle, you just drop all the cubes and boom. Did I win? Did I lose? So I like that aspect for sure, and I feel like it did a great job with that. Um, but I do, going back to it, that was like the biggest appeal, and that was the best appeal for me. That cube tower, and we're getting to a point where, okay, well, that's the cube tower action. Now, what do I do again? And it's a lot of just, it feels a little disjointed. And I'm not knocking the game. I mean, I still like the game. I'm just
Yeah.
saying I felt a little disjointed because of the rules complexity going back and forth. I felt like there were things that were a lot there was kind of unclear even in the updated rule book. Um and would I come back to Harrow County? I mean, we're going to come back for the expansion, but if I weren't if I weren't doing this review copy, I don't know if I would come right back. Be perfectly honest, um, because while I did enjoy my play, a lot of times I find myself personally in asymmetric games. The exciting part in asymmetric games sometimes is just learning the rule set. Like that's like a good example of that. I think is Root. I think Root
Mhm.
is a game where you wanna learn a rule set and master it. And I understand there's a market and a audience for that, and that audience is not me.
Right.
I don't like that. Um, but with Harrow County in particular, there are things that I did enjoy. The Cube Tower for sure. Uh, but both times when we were playing, it got to that point where I felt comfortable at the very end, and then the game is over. And I don't know if that is going to resonate for the future plays of this game.
So I think that is one of the things we have only so much that we can hold in our brain, right? And so only so
Yeah.
much information. So I almost needed a rules reference for this one, just to remind myself of certain little things, right? And that certainly would have been helpful. Overall, my impression of this, and I kind of shared this a little bit on Call Aboard, is I enjoyed it. I really did. I liked it. I think you pointed out the art in this game is absolutely beautiful. I think it looks great on a table, certainly. So kudos in that department. The tower, the cube tower battle I think that was a ton of fun. I'm nowhere near mastering how the best way to play some of these characters is based on the plays that we have.
Yeah.
By no means, but it's going to require repeat plays. So even though I enjoyed it, my highest level of concern, and I know Dan's played this one, by the way,
Hmm.
because I see Dan here in the chat. Uh, my largest concern with this game is, will I be able to get to the table with someone? And if it's not you, who is it? Right. And that's what my concern is, because even though I enjoyed it, I need someone who's played it before, because otherwise I have a distinct advantage coming back to this game with someone who hasn't played it, which
Do
means
you
that
though?
person.
Because I feel like if you give that a month or two, it's going to go out of your brain and you're going to forget about it.
I suppose that's a fair
Yeah.
argument. That's a fair argument, but I'm gonna have to do the teach regardless, and I don't want to constantly be teaching. That's my one thing. Like I don't want to. I like teaching, but I don't want to constantly be teaching the one game. Whereas like Targi's a quick teach. I can teach and again, not a comparable game. I'm just saying some of these games are quick teach. This is a little bit of a longer teach.
Yeah.
And so am I willing to do a longer teach repeatedly? Not so much. So I did enjoy it. If anyone listened to me on call board when I kind of did my overview of my thoughts, a little bit of repetition, but I will just say, yes, I enjoyed it. Asymmetric capabilities on a 2-player level certainly I thought were interesting to me. And as from a 2-player game perspective, yes, I thought it played perfectly fine. I do think I think it's interesting when the concept of adding in that third who messes things up. And I think that might be for people to try. But again, the rules are not light. So you've got to be ready to embrace that. So if you're good with that heavier set of rules and you want to be able to truly master it, I think this game could be something for you. But you've got to be ready for that, because it's nearly a 4 on BGG in weight. And a lot of that to me is because of those rules. And there are rules that seem really clear, but then are slightly different because of the character you're playing. And that changes everything. So it's a lot of, to me, double checking, as you mentioned. But overall, I did enjoy it. I did like the game. It had a lot of good things going for it. I will say, to your point as well, I definitely did not expect it to be. I expected more thematic feeling to it,
Yeah.
whereas certainly did not get that, and that's not a knock. That's just kind of an observation.
So final number then, right now. Well, final as of now until we do the expansion.
This is final on the base
So
experience.
out of a 10 rating, I would give it a 6.5 right now.
6.5. Okay. Yeah, for me, this was a 7.2.
Okay.
7.2. I did enjoy it, like I said, but in a category of other games that I can play that bring a similar experience, it just did not hold the weight in
Yeah.
that department for me. But I admire a lot of the things that it tried to do. I think it's a complex game, bottom
Yeah.
line, and you've got to be ready to invest in that.
Yeah. All right. So that's our rating for Harrow County, the game of Gothic Conflict. This is again was a review copy, and we will be covering the expansion, Harrow County, the folk expansion, in the end of this year.
Yeah, before the end of the year. With that, I'll say thank you to everyone. Have a great day. And you can check out the other games we reviewed last night on the latest episode of Call Board, the October 2024 edition. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.